So today we're starting off the week with a Audi A6 2.7T overhaul. So the car behind me, it's pretty cool. It's a 6-speed manual A6 with the 2.7. The owner is the newest owner of the car. He's only had it for a couple weeks, and he's decided to go the proper route of taking care of all the unknown maintenance that hasn't been done possibly. So we're starting off with timing belts, valve covers, plugs. We're going to do some boost leak tests as well as some logging to make sure everything is healthy. So I'll cut you in here and there when I come across something or as I finish up different things. I'll also show you guys how to properly set the timing when you don't know who's done it last and you need to start right from factory settings. So as you can see, the car's decently clean. It actually has all the covers. There's the air dam back there. We're just missing the rear cowl cover and also the battery's weird size that doesn't fit. The only major issue that I can tell right off the bat with the car is we do have some major power steering pump whine, and I'm assuming that that's probably just coming from the pump, but we'll dive into that after we're done everything else and see what it's going to take to fix that. Unfortunately, that's not the easiest job, especially with northern cars that have some rust, as to get to some of the bolts at the back of the pump, you generally have to remove the intake manifold. See, I have the whole front end of the car off. The coolant is still dribbling out there. I'm catching it. Did find that the clutch fan is completely destroyed. You can see all the fins are missing, or a majority of them. Luckily, the rad, though, on the backside is untouched. Usually, if that fan explodes that badly, it'll shoot towards the rad and blow a hole in it, maybe. In this case, we're lucky. No worries. I have extras of these, so I'm going to throw one of those on. Just for you guys, if you haven't done this on an A6, it's similar to a B6 with the 3 nuts here at the back after you take the headlight out, and then there's 2 fasteners on the fender liner. But otherwise, basically from this point on, it's the same as any B5 S4 or any 2.7 in any other car. Basically, I'm going to take off all of the front parts of the engine and then crawl underneath and get the crank pin in, and then start with removing the belt and putting the cam lock bar on and all that good stuff. Fast forward to the next day, all my parts came in and I had already stripped off the front of the engine. So now I'm going to just review the proper way to set the timing belt on the car, especially if you don't know how it was set last time. It can get sloppy and the actual timing between the two cylinder heads can go out enough where it necessitates this whole proper procedure with the crank lock pin and the cam lock bar. So as you can see, all of the front covers are off. I've replaced the tensioner roller and the idler roller. As well, you can see the shinier new water pump. And as well, this actually had an aluminum thermostat housing on it. So I replaced the thermostat on there as well. Quick overview, I don't like to really go over torque specs because it's best to look them up for your own clarification, but all the small bolts are usually 10 Newton meters. I think that one is something like 20, that one's 45, and all that good stuff. That's all I remember off the top of my head. Make sure you look up in the service manual so you don't screw any of that up. So right now, what I have set up is I've used a puller to loosen the cam shaft gears, so these can rotate freely. You can kind of see swivels a slight bit there, as well as this one, obviously. The crank lock pin is in. The best way to make sure that's in the right spot is put it near the top dead center mark on the cover here, and then thread that in with one hand, and with the other hand use a wrench and kind of wiggle this back and forth until the crank lock pin bottoms out. So now what you want to do is release tension on the hydraulic tensioner. That will take up all the slack in the belt, and then you can go ahead and tighten each of these camshaft gears back on. This way it should ensure that when you look into, I think it's measuring block 93, you should be within, I think it's 4 correction factors, and that'll give you the optimal timing for the engine. That way the computer isn't trying to compensate for a bunch of stuff. I've seen these really badly out. If you look back more than a few videos, there was this half red, half black car, and it was like 14 plus correction factors out. So especially if it's a car like this, where I think we might be doing some major upgrades to it after, I want to make sure that this is absolutely as good as it can be, rather than just trying to do it fast and get it in and out. I'd rather take my time and make sure it's done the right and proper way. So as you can see, I have the one side valve cover off. I've finished up the timing. That's all good. It's within the 4 correction factors, which is nice. I was hoping it would be dead nuts on, but obviously it's not perfect every time. And then I'm going to finish up the valve covers tonight. And as you can see, I have a new fan piece on. This one actually ground away at the back side of it. This is just the pulley item. It's not the actual fan, but even still, something's going on weird. So I replaced this whole thing, and I have a fan, same style and everything. This is probably also one of the worst valve cover gaskets I've ever done. I don't know when the last time this was changed, but I've never really seen one that brittle where it's just cracking. The actual edge of the valve cover gasket is really, really brittle and bad. It was hard to even get off. And I don't know if you can see, but there's a ton of oil sitting in the spark plug wells. So I'm going to have to spray a little bit of brake clean in there when the valve cover is back on to make the oil a little bit more liquid, and then I can hold a rag over top and blow it out and have the rag absorb most of the liquid. And then I'll switch the spark plugs. I have a new set of BKR7s going in, of course. So the A6 is mostly buttoned up. I did end up swapping over the power steering pump, but the fluid is super burnt, and I think we're still sucking in some air on the supply line hoses. So the 190-degree hose is on order, and for the reservoir to the hard pipe, I'm just going to use generic power steering hose because there's not very much of a bend in it. So that's pretty much all that's left with that one. But now, behind me, you can see that we have a B5S4 that got brought in last night. So the initial problem, why this came back, was we have no clutch. The pedal just sinks to the floor and can't get it into gear. So first idea was that the slave cylinder was bad, and I topped it up, pumped the pedal a few times, and fluid is just pouring out of the bell housing. So definitely the slave cylinder. So waiting on that to come by. Also pulled out the driver's side axle as the inner boot was super ripped, but I've also found there's some little bit of play in that axle. For the cost of rebooting this or just getting a new replacement axle, yes, it won't be OEM, but it's just cheaper and better at this point. So while we're waiting for those parts, I swapped out the spark plugs, obviously BKR7s, gap to about 0.028. And this is a stage 2 tuned car, and I did pull out their PK6s or something like that. They're a 6 plug, and obviously with the tune, you want to usually go one step colder, so I'm glad I changed those out, so those will be fresh. And then I was in the process of doing a boost leak test, and lo and behold, the F-hose is torn right up. So I don't know if I'm going to do that today or another time, but we will have to do the F-hose delete, so that's taking off and capping the one spider hose at the back, and then just taking this line down here and jumping it to the manifold. This car was also in last week, I think it was, and I did some flushing of the heater core, and now there is heat, so that's nice. But now we're just trying to get it running right and get everything tight so there's no leaks, and we're boosting I think it's about 18 psi or so and holding all the way to red line. Right now it's tapering off to like 13 psi, probably mostly because this hose is just bleeding off massive amounts of boost. The rip is really big. You won't be able to see it if I show you, but it's very massive.